I wear ridiculously tight jeans.
Because they're hip, and I want to stay young.
Well, stay old, bro, because that looks terrible.
We need to talk about the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger acquisition thing. I saw a poll.
If I ever find one of these lying around again, I swear to fucking God, I will stop being so polite.
What's up, gamers? Dreamcast guy here.
Get the out of my sight before I demolish you.
And it said, is this going to be good for consumers? Yes or no? And it was an overwhelming yes vote.
It was not a rigged election. It was not a stolen election. You and your supporters lost.
Since when was consolidation ever good for consumers?
Why did you do this? Because it's funny, Kyle. It's called having a sense of humor and laughing. You should try it.
The judge who rejected this. It's not the harm to Sony we care about. It's the harm to the consumers.
Based? Based? Hello?
And that she blocked the FTC's complaints.
This face right here, this is the person who decided that, you know, they should be allowed to merge because it's good for the consumers.
Listen, pal. You just made my list.
Your list?
Just a bunch of fans of Microsoft Xbox just being like, yeah, eat it, suck it, PlayStation fans.
How is that good for the consumer?
Because it's funny.
When one company is allowed to control this much of our culture, it kind of starts to destroy the culture. Look at this. This is another thing. Superman in the same game as Arya Stark, in the same game as Bugs Bunny, in the same game as Shaggy, in the same game as Batman.
It's really weird
That all of this culture is just kind of slammed together. I think that's kind of what's going to happen with all this Microsoft stuff. If we get that much under one umbrella,
It's going to be bad for culture.
It's best to just make old people think they matter.
and if the FTC loses its appeal, it's going to start transferring wealth to the top even faster.
You better hide that big-ass forehead.
This is not going to be good for you.
This is bad for all of us. It's bad for culture. It'll set a terrible precedent moving forward.
Dude, what the f***? Why are you f***ing here, man? You're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
We need to talk about the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger acquisition thing.
Your forehead big as
As if we haven't talked enough about it as it is, and oh my Jesus Christ!
That's quite big.
Oh, okay, we need to, address the forehead elephant in the room? Yes, I know. You noticed it too. It's, very distracting and hard to ignore. And that's that this is Tek Syndicate.
Who?
Oh God, what has happened over the years? No, it's not the haircut or the forehead. It's the viewership. I couldn't tell this was Tek Syndicate based on that viewership. At one point, his channel could have gone head to head with Linus Tech Tips. Now it seems like he can't even go head to head with DSP Gaming. I don't even know why he kept tech in the channel name. He gave up on doing tech videos, which sucks because now he's covering subjects way out of his field of expertise. Now in the late stage of his career, he gets to torture you with his awful opinions and lack of charisma. See, I knew people subbed to him before because of the tech videos. Now I don't know why they tune in, but I know what I'm tuning in for. Terrible takes. They just follow the ABK merger news wherever it goes. So many shitty, terrible, awful takes from people who are way out of their element. Now, this both infuriates me and makes me happy at the same time, because on one hand, nobody wants to watch terrible videos for a living. Trust me, kids, go to college. But also because it's a breath of fresh air to finally move away from Dreamcast Guy and Reforge Gaming and MBG, and at long last have a new challenger. This lolcow will make a fine addition to our collection. Well, we might have to count it as two lolcows, him and his forehead.
I saw a poll online, and this is not one of those things where I saw one person say something and I'm going to outrage farm based upon what one obscure person said. I saw a poll and it said, is this going to be good for consumers? Yes or no? And it was an overwhelming yes vote. Since when was consolidation ever good for consumers?
My God, I just said I wasn't gonna talk about Dreamcast Guy. Why is he everywhere? But most importantly, this is not a credible poll, Tech. No, not because 90% of the people voting are there to troll Dreamcast Guy because, you know, he's cringe. No. It's because, well, Dreamcast Guy is a meth head.
At a time once my buddy was like, let's go buy some weed. So we go to the bad side of town and we go to this guy's apartment and we buy stuff. And we're like, what is this? We go home and he's like, oh, this isn't weed. He sold us a fucking, because he gave it as a brown paper bag. And he's like, oh, this is meth. So we go back to the guy's apartment. We're like, hey, I would like a refund and get some marijuana. And the guy was like, I don't know who you are. And I don't know why you're bringing meth in my apartment, but get the fuck out. So we went back home and my buddy was like, well, I guess I'll just go ahead and smoke all this meth. So we just smoked a bunch of meth.
Jesus Christ.
Y'all tell anybody I'll kill you!
Now I know what you're thinking. Come on, Frit, that's methed up. Yeah, it is, but are you really gonna give much credit to a poll constructed by a meth head?
One of the things you learn after years of dealing with drug people is that you can turn your back on a person, but never turn your back on a drug, especially when it's waving a razor-sharp hunting knife in your eye.
Plus, didn't you read how Dreamcast guy worded that poll? He had it written out so that anyone who voted yes looks like they're in favor of mass consolidation, and is unreasonable, because the person making this poll was highly against it. So right off the bat, this entire video was made over a Dreamcast guy poll he got trolled on.
Before we get into talking about all this money, let me show you my new wallet.
Yeah, we're not buying your shitty wallet, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and skip this giant ad you put more effort into than the video.
But first off, I want to show you where some of this is coming from. It's not just the console wars of nonsense. It's not just a bunch of fans of Microsoft Xbox just being like, yeah, eat it, suck it, PlayStation fans.
Well, in the case of that Dreamcast guy poll, it actually is. I'm telling you. That was a terrible example to bring up. Like I said, because the majority voting on that poll are there to trigger and troll him. Because he does have a PlayStation bias. That poll that you based your entire video off of was just a bunch of console fanboy nonsense. Did you not read the comments?
A lot of it starts with this message that we're hearing, and I'll play it right now. Well, let's continue this narrative.
Good news, I think, is starting to prevail that ultimately, if it's good for the consumer, the government can't just block everything. And right now the government's been in a block everything. And as we've said repeatedly, in many of these...
So did you hear what he said there? If it's good for the consumer. And when I first heard that, I was like, oh, he's going to argue that it's bad for the consumer because he's saying if, but let's keep going.
These examples, these deals are actually good for consumers. They're good.
Now, you of all people know you have no right talking about the dead eyes of anyone. It looks like your soul left your body a long-ass time ago. The Queen of England looks more alive than you.
Deals are actually good for consumers. They're good for pricing. They're good for choice. And
they're good for pricing. They're good for choice. Having one corporate overlord own everything is good for pricing and good for choice.
That's nothing like what I just said.
Yeah, well, last I checked, Activision isn't everything. Not even close. Alright? Microsoft does not own everything. As big as this acquisition is, it's not even close to closing off the gap. And in the case of Microsoft owning Activision, it is bringing up new choices and new price ranges for consumers. Being able to play games on subscription services that didn't exist before is not only a new price point for consumers, but it's also a new choice that has not previously existed, and one that I'm willing to take full advantage of. I mean, for Christ's sakes, the old COD servers are back up. Do you really think that was Activision's doing? You really think they're competent enough to fix their own servers? No, that's something Microsoft did. So 360 era Call of Duty is back. Wow, look at that. Console players were given the choice of playing the old shit again without having to pay full price for it.
You know, back in the day, our government used to break up monopolies by saying it's bad for consumers, it's bad for the market, we don't want to have just one company that controls everything.
And the lawmakers back then would have still understood that what Microsoft is doing right now is not even close to what a monopoly is. Unlike the current FTC, whose job that was, to protect consumers, but instead they protected Sony.
But now a lot of these companies have been going to the lawmakers and saying, listen, this whole, like anti-monopoly thing, that wasn't to try to stop the corporations from becoming too big. That was mainly to protect the people. And we believe that it's better for the people if there's less competition because one giant mega company can come in and control the entire supply chain, and we can lower the prices for them and we can take better care of them, and it's more convenient because now instead of having to go through multiple different companies and go to one store to get your cheese and go to a different store to get your vegetables, we can go to one store and buy everything, and it's cheaper and easier for the consumers. So we believe that monopoly laws were designed to protect consumers from having to deal with nonsense. And since everything under one roof is good, we can essentially make the world a better place. That's kind of what they're saying. We hear that narrative from him.
That's nothing like what I just said.
Unfortunately, you just sold me on consolidation. Yes, I do like going to my supermarket and getting everything at one store. It's nice. Who in the world would want to have to go to a vegetable store, a dairy store, a bread store, a meat store? And funny enough, those options still exist to this day. Consumer convenience is always going to be seen as a positive thing. If you're in favor of saying nobody should attempt to try and make life easier for people, I'm going to have to disagree with you. Sucks to suck, but the corporations are kind of making a better argument. Even then, we're talking about the consolidation of an entirely different market than video games, okay? Which is what that analyst was talking about, video games. In which case he's right. This is good for pricing and this is good for choice. That doesn't mean he's implying that one corporation owning everything is good for pricing and choice. You're the one that put those words in his mouth. You added your own narrative to this. I bet you anything this mofo watches Jim Sterling. Where else do you get such a hate boner for corporations?
The judge who rejected this. All right, so here they're all like talking about protecting consumers by allowing massive monopolies and mergers. She says, it's not the harm to Sony we care about, it's the harm to the consumers.
Based? Based? Hello?
Just imagine trying to make that sound like a sinister evil thing. How dare she? What a bitch.
So Biden, and that she blocked the FTC's complaints.
You say it like it's a bad thing.
As she should have, because they were all complaints in favor of Sony and a cloud gaming market that still doesn't fully exist yet. As it says in their job description, they're there for the consumers, yet they fail to do so in front of the judge.
This face right here, this.
Who decided that, they should be allowed to merge because it's good for the consumers.
Yes, the face of someone who did their job and thankfully stopped the FTC from wasting more of our tax dollars, which is the bigger picture here. That's just flying right above your head.
So it's good for the consumers that Microsoft is going to have a huge share of the market, massive share of the market, and that they're going to be able to put all that stuff on their console and withhold it from other consoles. How is that good for the consumer?
You mean exclusives? Is that what you're talking about? Exclusives? Yeah, no, exclusives are not good for the consumer. Never have been. But if both Sony and Nintendo funding their own games and deciding to publish them solely on their own consoles is not seen as a bad thing, then this cannot be viewed as a bad thing either. If you're arguing against the idea of exclusivity, I'm all aboard. But I know you're just being selective here. Microsoft still must compete in some form, and if having Activision content solely for the Xbox creates more competition, then in theory, PlayStation fans should start benefiting when Sony starts trying. Sony's gonna have to fight extra hard to match the value of Game Pass or even outdo it. I mean, when Microsoft is talking about consumers and gamers, which ones do you think they're talking about? PlayStations? No.
Oh, well, they're gonna give them a better thing because then they can get all this stuff under one umbrella. They can get all their stuff from Bethesda and its software, and since they've got it all, they'll just lower the prices.
No, they're not going to lower their prices. Yeah, right. No, instead what's gonna happen is you're gonna be able to bypass the full price of a $70 game by simply subscribing to a service like Game Pass, which is significantly cheaper on a monthly basis than purchasing video games. When people say it'll be cheaper for consumers, this is what they mean. A service like this is highly beneficial in a market where games are too damn expensive and too damn broken.
Every piece of empirical data shows that when companies like Amazon exist, and once they completely destroy all the mom and pops and all the small competition, they don't lower their prices. That would be insane for them to do. Once there's no other choices for the consumers, they can just raise their prices as high as they want, and that is what they have done.
Yet it's still significantly cheaper for me to get an Apple iPhone charging cable from Amazon than any of my local retail stores. Hell, it's even cheaper to shop on Amazon than it is at my local Walmart. While the prices of basically everything around us are gonna go up, shopping on Amazon still stays relatively cheaper than anywhere else. Now, I don't know why you say once consumers have no choice. Consumers have plenty of choices. Amazon doesn't run the world, no matter how much its owner Lex Luthor wants to. Choices for consumers still exist. They still have plenty of options on where they want to choose to shop. Amazon is not the only thing. So not only does your point not work for Amazon, it works even far less with Microsoft. I mean, you're talking about a scenario that doesn't even exist.
That's why we've seen record inflation. It's not because we're printing gazillions of dollars. That's a small piece of it. The truth is that the companies are just extremely greedy.
Well, that's one aspect of inflation, yes, but to say printing money has nothing to do with it is absolutely retarded. That is a huge contributor. No defense to the corporations here. Them alongside government regulations is why we're all suffering. Well, some of us. I'm doing fine. With a lot of workers deciding not to return after COVID, it's easy to see where a lot of those company profits are coming from. Hell, some employees opted to take a pay cut if it meant they could work a more flexible schedule from home. It can't all be boiled down simply to corporate greed.
So inflation is just a measure of how much the price of goods has gone up, and the price of the people are getting paid is about the same, so that makes the inflation go up. That's how it works. It's not just printing money. Printing money is bad for inflation. If the wages don't go up, that's not happening, so that's bad. But then the companies are raising their prices on things, and they're not giving raises to their employees. And whenever their employees complain, they either get fired, or they say, oh, we don't have any money. And then you look at the actual news, and they're all posting record profits. That's what inflation is. And that's what happens when only a few companies control everything. They can set the prices to be whatever they want, and you have to pay it or go without.
Considering a good chunk of our inflation happened during COVID, I highly doubt that's the reason. Our supply chain was massively impacted by COVID. Plus, less people working. It was bound to fuck our economy up. Let's not forget, not every business in the world, and not every worker out there in the world, is tied to a big corporation. And they're still raising their own prices. It's clear our dollar's worth less now than ever before, and you can't convince me otherwise. Not to mention, raising wages usually results in an increase on prices as well. So even if you were to get paid more, it doesn't mean you're gonna pay less for products. Your wage can go up, but as long as the dollar's devalued, you're not gonna feel a difference. So I highly doubt a corporation like Microsoft purchasing Activision is gonna be one of the direct results of inflation. Video game prices have been going up over the last 3 years. Around the same time inflation and COVID hit us. Hell, the price of Microsoft games and their Game Pass subscription service are going up long before this acquisition.
Let's go over some reminders here. This is all the stuff that Disney has been allowed to acquire.
What the hell are you talking about? What the hell does this have to do with anything? Tell me what's happening!
There's all this stuff.
Yeah, and as big as that is, that's only about 33% of the industry. This chart dwarfs, absolutely dwarfs, Microsoft's share of the gaming market. I mean, it's not even close. It's like comparing the Earth to the sun. Not even Tencent. Again, I don't think you can grasp exactly how vastly different these two markets are. Makes the Activision purchase look like a baby's toy. Also, this has absolutely nothing to do with Microsoft Activision, so why are we here?
And this is kind of what I want to look at this for companies like Microsoft and Tencent. Those are the two of the biggest companies in the world right now when it comes to the share of the video game industry.
You forgot Sony? Hello? Sony? The #1 market leader in the entire gaming industry? I mean, hello? Hell, you forgot Embracer Group, who owns more than Sony, Take-Two, and Microsoft combined. I mean, Jesus Christ, if there was anybody you sure as hell don't want to own Activision, it should be Embracer Group.
But once you get that big, you can start to set different guidelines and completely squash culture.
Squash the culture? The culture! You'll have to excuse me, I never considered how Microsoft owning Activision Blizzard could seriously squash our culture. I thought TikTok did that already. I mean, as far as I know, the only culture that's been cultivated from Activision Blizzard is a bunch of preteens telling you that they fucked your mom in COD lobbies.
They start shoving everything into this tiny little box that everything has to be made a certain way. The certain formula has to be used, and we have to produce stuff that's going to, hit mass appeal. That leaves out a lot of the fringes. A lot of the counterculture is just completely gone.
Oh yes, Activision Blizzard, the company making the most pro-war American games on the planet, is very, very, very counterculture. I'm convinced. Yes, the hippies that went to Woodstock are the ones who are buying Call of Duty. Yeah, totally.
When one company is allowed to control this much of our culture, it kind of starts to destroy the culture.
Now, you're using a very, very loose definition of culture here. Hell, I'd argue you're misusing the word. But clearly what you're saying is not true. Otherwise, we wouldn't have those old COD servers back up and running on Xbox for people to start playing again. Because wouldn't that actually be an example of preserving culture? Ensuring people can play the older generation titles for years to come? So it looks like the opposite to me. It don't look like the culture's being destroyed. It looks like quite the opposite.
Look at this. This is another thing. Warner Brothers, they're the other thing. Like, you got Disney and you got Warner Brothers, and they own all this, and we've got Multiverse is the game.
Again, why are we bringing up corporations that are not Microsoft to make points against Microsoft? It doesn't help. You continue to compare two entirely different worlds, and each of those comparisons isn't even close to adding up to what Microsoft owns. Stop. This is not making the point you think it is.
It's a good way to look and just see how ridiculous all this is. You have Superman in the same game as Arya Stark, in the same game as Bugs Bunny, in the same game as Shaggy, in the same game as Batman, in the same game as Tom and Jerry, in the same game as Wonder Woman, in the same game as Adventure.
You can't just have your characters
fight each other.
That makes me feel angry.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point. It's a massive crossover of Warner Brothers IPs. It's supposed to be ridiculous, and that's why people like it. Unless you think Marvel vs. Capcom destroyed the culture, or Super Smash Bros., or Mortal Kombat vs. DC. All games I'm pretty sure you enjoyed. I don't even know what you're arguing against anymore. Are you against crossovers? Something about the culture? Inflation? How far are you willing to reach just to tell people that they're crazy for supporting the Activision purchase?
Now, I guess some people think that that's awesome, but it's weird. It's really weird.
See, this is why you don't get invited to parties. You're no fun. Everybody at a party will be playing multiverses, having the time of their lives, and you'll be the one in the back of the room thinking to yourself, can't they see how upset I am about this? And the only thing they're gonna notice is your forehead.
That all of this culture is just kind of slammed together. Okay, I think it's a little gross. Whether the game's fun or not, and all this is make-believe and it's all silly.
So, this is weird, but Mario fighting, I don't know, Solid Snake isn't weird? Or Sonic the Hedgehog fighting Bowser isn't weird? Or what, Wolverine fighting Ryu isn't weird? This is weird. This is destroying the culture, even though crossover games have been a part of the culture since basically nearly the beginning of the industry. What we're having here is legitimately an old man yells at cloud moment.
I really miss the individual quirkiness that each individual thing has, each individual brand.
Why are you acting like it doesn't exist? Each of these IPs is still unique and quirky in its own way. That hasn't changed. Gremlins is still Gremlins. Rick and Morty is still, well, sadly, Rick and Morty. Scooby-Doo is still Scooby-Doo. Wait, never mind. Well, at least Iron Giant's still Iron Giant, right? Nothing about this game has taken away anything unique about these characters. If anything, this is the perfect way to display the uniqueness of each of these characters. And hell, it brings light to old IPs. Would you look at that?
All right. I think that's kind of what's going to happen with all this Microsoft stuff. If we get that much under one umbrella, it's going to be bad for culture.
Is that what you mean by culture? Intellectual properties never collaborating on anything once? Or you just don't like to see them in a fighting game? I don't understand, but both are retarded.
And that's the main thing that I really care about. The money is really important, and I think it will be bad for consumers. It will remove choices from consumers. You'll have to choose one platform over the other to make sure that you get the games that you want.
You mean like we have it now? You know, the reason why Sony's Spider-Man isn't on Xbox? Putting people in a position where they have to choose which console they're gonna get? What you're talking about is nothing new. It's a practice as old as gaming itself. So either you're against exclusivity altogether or you're being selective. But don't you just love how the topic of exclusivity wasn't debated until Microsoft started getting exclusive content? Are we really gonna sit here and pretend like PlayStation and Nintendo weren't worshipped for putting gamers in a position where they have to choose a console? But the minute Microsoft joins them in doing the same thing, all of a sudden it's a problem, it's a concern, it's something we should all be worried about.
And a lot of franchises are just going to vanish because they don't measure up. And, you know, a big company like that, they can't focus on everything. They're going to put a gazillion dollars in just a few big silos, and all the rest of it's going to be like whatever. Like, look what happened to Deus Ex. Like, where the hell is that? They're probably busy working on some nonsense. I think it got sold. I don't even know.
Well, you're gonna have to blame Square for that one because they sold it off to Embracer Group. That doesn't have a goddamn thing to do with Microsoft, let alone Activision. Now, Phil Spencer's word isn't anything to go on, I know. But him mentioning that they want to take the opportunity to bring back old IPs from Activision we haven't heard from in a while sounds like pretty good news. I mean, we're already seeing them do it with the COD servers. Servers that Activision was just willing to let die. So we're already seeing the complete opposite of what you're suggesting.
But yeah, it's weird. And then when you look at the cost of these things, and this is, again, I'm just kind of ranting out of turn right now, but when a company like Microsoft buys something like this, they don't like to use the word buy. They're shifting value around.
Well, I mean, yeah, no shit, because purchase is the proper word you want to use for something this big. You and I, we buy goods. We don't purchase companies. Obviously, $1 trillion company is not going to use the word buy to describe this acquisition. Jesus Christ, you really couldn't think of another word off the top of your head to use?
It's like they'll trade value in their stock for all of that property, and their value stays the same. You know what I mean? They've given up this much of their own value in their stocks and whatever money, maybe. And they've acquired all these things. So to them, their value is still the same.
Yeah, no, wrong. Their value actually skyrocketed. Not only did they make all of their money on this acquisition back, but they also basically doubled it.
Anyway, we'll have to see what happened. I know the FTC is going to fight this.
I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
And I wish I could say it was a good fight, but they got absolutely folded, exposed, and had their budget cut because they didn't do their job of actually protecting the consumers.
A very bad precedent because something on this scale, it's huge. And if the FTC loses its appeal, we're going to see so much consolidation so quickly, and it's going to start transferring wealth to the top even faster.
Well, I mean, I'd hate to tell you this, but the FTC's been on a losing streak for quite some time. And I gotta ask, how do you think wealth like this is even generated in the first place? By people like you? No, neither you or I are capable of generating this type of revenue. So I don't want to hear you complaining about wealth that you would have never had a chance of gaining in the first place.
Hopefully this will go through. I am making the video before I know what's happening with this. But hopefully the appeal becomes a thing. Hopefully they get a little more focus. But this is not going to be good for you. This is not something that you should be gloating about on social media. This is not a way to like score one against the other console people that you hate so much. This is not that.
Well, I mean, the appeal was a thing when you made this video. I mean, at the very least, we can end this video on one agreement. Yes, it's a absolutely childish and stupid thing to be gloating about. Nothing but fuel for autism. But at the same time, I don't ever want to hear anybody complain about Microsoft not making any big moves ever again. Those who were the most vocal about it finally got what they wanted, and now they're crying about it. And that, to me, is far more childish than gloating.
This is bad for all of us.
Bad for some of us, okay? I mean, if you only own a PlayStation, you're screwed, okay? But to say it's bad for all of us is not true. Those who own Xboxes and PCs are about to benefit massively. And last I checked, you're PC-centric, so I don't see what you're complaining about.
It's bad for culture. It'll set a terrible precedent moving forward.
Sorry, I don't know how to tell you this, but if there's a game where I can play as the Doomslayer, fighting Master Chief, fighting Marcus from Gears of War, fighting a Ferrari in Forza, I'm probably gonna pick up that game and play it. And if you don't like that concept, well, that's your problem, not the culture's.
That's the end of the video. I just wanted to cover some of this stuff, give you a little bit more perspective in case you're missing stuff. But
yeah, no, there's a bunch of information you were missing from this video. Anybody who came here and clicked on it was actually misinformed. So thanks. Thanks for doing that for all of us. I don't think it would have been possible to be entertained by your content if it wasn't for me. What is it with people who've not actually been following this story, chiming in and having the worst takes possible? From Dreamcast Guy to Jesse Cox to this jackass, all people who I guarantee would not have made any videos complaining had it been PlayStation. This may have been a breath of fresh air for viewers who are getting sick of all the same faces on this channel, but stupid takes are nothing fresh to me. It's like everyone who's against this acquisition doesn't even know why they're against it. Like they've been programmed to just be anti-corporate by default. I mean, you're all sounding like Jim Ryan, okay? Because these are all the arguments Jim Ryan made, minus the culture one. And guess what? He ended up being wrong. Not just wrong, but a liar. He ended up lying about all of his concerns, which means none of yours are legitimate. Just know wherever ABK News is, bad takes are to be found. And the worst ones are coming from people who are not even PlayStation fanboys. Anyways, Tek Syndicate, I'm gonna keep an eye on you. You're an absolute gold mine. So I want to thank you and your forehead for joining us. And I want to thank all of you, my wonderful addicts, for tuning in and watching per usual. This video is way longer than I wanted it to be, so you should hit like, comment, share, and subscribe if you so choose to. On the road to 69K subs, let's make it happen. That being said, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Free Congo sucks ass.